Welcome to Come to Think of It, a program where we talk about things that matter. I'm your host, K.C. Scott. My guest today is once again Roget Lockard. Welcome to the program, Roget.
Thanks, Casey. Glad to be back.
We are always great to have you here. We are doing a series on the nature of addiction. This is the 6th program in the series. Roget is an addictions counselor and has long experience in the field, and is also, as am I, recovering addict. And so we're just going to pick up right where we left off. Roget, last time we were talking about specific categories of technologies of addiction. Mm-hmm. And once again, I'm going to assume that everybody at this point knows that when we're talking about a technology, we're referring to a systematic means of manipulating something for the purpose of control. We talked about substance, behavior, and relationship. But in our discussion of behavior, I realized after the fact that we left out one rather significant thing that I think we probably should touch on a little bit, and that's gambling. Mm-hmm. So would you like to pick that up?
Well, I'd be glad to, principally, simply to agree with you that it was a fairly conspicuous omission. And at the same time, it exemplifies what we made kind of a big deal of last program, in the sense that none of these categories of technology, and let me just once again, for a refresher, fine-tune your very faithful definition of it down to a category. Systematic methods of manipulation, in this case, our experience of self. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're up to with
yes.
addiction.
Yeah.
And as we found in our previous conversation, none of these categories playing out in real life are simply exclusive. Even the ones that would seem to be exclusive, like heroin or something like that, where it seems, okay, he's addicted to heroin, that's it. We find that there are many other of the categories, behavioral and so forth. And this is also true, of course, with gambling. It has been interesting, to put it neutrally, and really quite painful, to put it subjectively, to live long enough. I'm 70 years old now, and I remember when gambling was a marginal feature of our culture, yes, and our society, and our economy, and so forth and so on. Not insignificant. I don't want to over-exaggerate this, but gambling has become a principal recreational resource. As we're speaking, MGM has just won, evidently, the bid to try to get a casino established in Springfield, Massachusetts. Yes. Mm-hmm. And not everyone, but great gobs of people are beside themselves with joy. Mm. I have had some personal experience with gambling, not to a severe degree, but I've also witnessed, I have watched gambling in action, and I have to say it's, well, let me tell you this one, if I may.
Yes, please.
Two contrasting vignettes, and one is a substance, technology, and the other is gambling. I spent, I believe it was 6 hours in a casino in Las Vegas. That was enough. And I'm glad I did. I had a good time. I took $35 in there and doubled it, and then lost it all, and was happy with that. But while I was there, it was like late evening to early morning, 10 to 3 or something like that. I was much younger. And there was a woman at then the one-armed bandits when they were still mechanical.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And there was a woman sitting on a stool in front of one of those with an apron that held the tokens that you bought. And she was inserting tokens and pulling the lever.
I've seen that, yes.
On and on and on, and it reminded me of nothing so much as when I worked in a machine shop. And I would take a piece of metal, do the drill press thing, another piece of metal, drill press thing. Joyless, really absent any affect at all. And I observed that, I remarked on it to myself, went about whatever I was doing. And then shortly after that, all kinds of bells and whistles and lights and so forth went off, sirens, and I looked around to see what was going on. This lady had hit the jackpot, and the machine was disgorging tokens such that they were piling up on the floor around her. She had held her apron out to catch as many as possible, but it vastly overwhelmed the capacity. When that all stopped, the tokens stopped coming out and the lights stopped flashing and so forth. With no change in expression at any point, she got back on the stool and started putting. And it reminded me of something I had, well, actually vice versa. I saw that first, and then years later I saw a woman at a diner in Northampton at breakfast time.
Scratch tickets.
No. It's breakfast time. She was sitting at a table by herself. She was morbidly obese, alarmingly obese, unquestionably at least 400 pounds, probably a good bit more. And she was eating a banana split sundae with all of the toppings and the cherries and the whipped cream. This is 8 o'clock, maybe not even yet 8 o'clock. There was no joy on her face. This is what she had to do.
Yeah.
And it took me back to the lady at the... So I wanted to share this in part because so much of what I'm trying to do in these interviews and so forth is to find that magical way of making room for the almost infinite variability of the phenomena of addiction, how it is experienced subjectively, how it appears objectively, and so forth, and yet find our way back to the fundamental simplicity of what's going on, the ghastly simplicity of what's going on. But happily, later on, and we aren't there yet, and we won't be, I don't know how long, but later on when we get into the sobriety, the inversion, the resolution of addiction, we find that same phenomena of a great deal of complexity, but fundamental thematic simplicity.
Yes.
So I think I've drifted a bit apart from gambling here. But
not at all, because I think one of the interesting features of that, and I don't know whether we've talked about this in this way or not, but it seems to me that the so-called behavioral addictions, the gambling, sex, food, although food crosses the boundary also into a substance, but
they all cross boundaries.
They all cross boundaries, but it seems to me that these behavioral addictions are much tougher to root out and deal with than the substance addictions.
Well, certainly to the extent, and I know we touched on this last time, to the extent that the behaviors are either neutral, like eating, or applauded, like work, exercise, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the interesting features. I'm kind of jumping ahead in our discussion, but when we talk about this thing in a larger societal sense, we've taken a lot of the shame There's a shame that accompanies addiction, and we've taken that out a lot in many areas. And some of that's good. I mean, addicts should not necessarily be stigmatized as moral degenerates, or but to replace that shame with applause is probably more damaging.
Yeah, and we won't venture deep into this right now without distracting ourselves too much. But I do want to note that in my scheme of things, there is a tremendously significant distinction to be made between toxic shame and what I call healthy shame. And very simply, toxic shame is the inner experience / conviction that I am bad.
Yeah.
And healthy shame is registering the signals from what that old-fashioned word, our conscience, that tells us, ooh, that's not okay for me.
Yeah.
And so that phrase, I'm ashamed of myself, in that kind of instance, is very fortunate. And as you were, I think, saying, increasingly rare.
Yeah, because we do live in a society now that says it's okay to have another 3 casinos in Massachusetts.
It's somewhere between okay and very desirable,
well, a darn
necessary.
good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, necessary,
yeah,
right.
Definitely. Yeah.
I remember last time I mentioned that going from helpful to achieve fulfillment of longings to necessary to achieve fulfillment, and then simply necessary.
Simply necessary, yeah.
No longer fulfillment. And I do believe that's been the experience with gambling for a great many communities, but evidently we need to do it in ours as well.
We'll find out.
We will.
Yes. Okay. So the next item on this excuse me, on this list is ideology. And that's an interesting one because again, because if you look around the world we live in, we're so enmeshed in ideology on all fronts, whether it's religious, philosophical, political, and it seems to be impeding pretty much every aspect of our lives in one way or another.
Yeah. K.C., it's interesting to talk about this topic now because that is to say the category of ideology, because it was some quarter century ago or so that I first formulated these categories. And at that time, ideology substantially referred to the realm of ideas. And if one subscribed to an ideology, then there was a good likelihood that one could be reasonably articulate about what the tenets, the premises, the arguments that ideology set forth.
Sure.
That has become less and less true. And
there are no Bill Buckleys around anymore.
Et cetera. Yeah. I won't go off in that direction, but I could get grumpy about the current caliber of the vast majority of news commentators and so forth. But what I want to say is that what passes for ideology now increasingly is gestural rather than intellectual. And I think would be very apt to say that people who are caught up in ideological fixes, what's really going on is that they are adopting a stance.
Yes.
And that stance sort of signals to the world, to their co-subscribers, and then to people who subscribe to alternative or contending stances. not long ago, people were lamenting the fact that instead of ideas, people were settling for having opinions. But in my observation, over the course of the last decade, easily, even the notion that people have opinions that could be articulated with some persuasive content is less and less the case. We just take a stance behind certain gestural, again, symbolic kinds of material issues, so forth. And so,
well,
go ahead.
I want to return to that, but let us go back to your original meaning, the original sense in which you used ideology, and hear about that a little bit, because I think those are two entirely different things. The gestural stance and the ideology that actually is a constellation of ideas. Or is it essentially the same thing? It's the same mechanism with a different garb?
Well, I would say that insofar as our central interest in addiction is concerned, people who are addicted to ideology alone find it a kind of, and they are, with all the textual bells and whistles, they can quote chapter and verse and so forth and so on, and it may be biblical, it may be Mein Kampf or Das Kapital or whatever, Keynes, it doesn't matter really. It may be artistic, aesthetic, it can be really any ideological premise. The people who find nesting there, if you will, to be an existential solution, their world narrows, and their experience of personal enrichment becomes more and more a hostage to this source. This is what they feed on existentially, and it becomes I think later on we talk about intellectual technologies, cognition as a technology.
Yeah.
But again, of course, there's overlap, and the reason I just mentioned that is because there are people who are addicted to chess, for example, or I forget the name of that Asian game. That's very
Go.
It may be Go. I think it is. Little stones.
Yes.
And,
Go.
I've personally known people who had disablingly addictive relationship with Go and with chess. So that's...
Well, the reason I have no games on my computer and have not since the very beginning, the first computer I had Minesweeper on it. And I played Minesweeper until I injured myself. I actually injured my wrist playing Minesweeper.
Repetitive motion.
Yes, and after that I said no more games. So, but I think what you just posited is very interesting, because I think that really encapsulates the experience of addictions, that narrowing of experience to that just that one core technology or constellation of technologies, whatever, that becomes to define our experience of self.
One of the most encompassing gestural representations or characterizations of addiction that I know of is to say that in the beginning, we start out with a life of whatever size it may be. We discover the addictive technology, and our life goes like this. And for a while, measured in whatever time units it may be, months, years, decades, it stays, but over time, first not all that noticeably, but over time, increasingly noticeably, it narrows in. We are more and more preoccupied, a word I think we're going to come up to in the not distant future, preoccupied with the demands and the trappings of our addictive technology, until, in the extreme case, and I have seen this over and over and over, and I have lived it in very close proximity, there is nothing left but the addict and the addictive technology.
Yeah. We end up in a room with the windows, shades closed, the doors locked, and the phone off the hook.
Yep. And if, for example, it's alcohol, the bottle under the bed because we wake up every 2 hours and we need bottle, or if it's pornography,
whatever it is.
On and on and on.
Yeah, whatever it is.
But it's this incredible.
And the I guess the insidious part about the types of technologies that we're talking about now is that someone can outwardly appear to be living a whole normal life,
and not at this stage,
and still be in that constricted ideological state or behavioral state.
Right. Although once it gets down to that absolute narrow place,
you're eating
it becomes
banana splits,
quite conspicuous.
Banana splits at breakfast time. That's
exactly. Yeah.
But affect.
Affect meaning feelings.
Yes.
What we,
or the expression of feelings, which actually spills over into gesture.
Sure. Well, as I think I've mentioned, I have the notion of gesture as one of the categories of technology struck me at the very beginning almost as a playful little side notion.
At first mention, it sounds trivial.
Yes, it sounds. I have come to feel that it may arguably be the single most significant of all of the categories, but we're not ostensibly not there yet.
Right.
So, in terms of feelings, let's name some feeling.
Oh, anger. I know
anger.
A lot of people are addicted to anger. And
power. People can become addicted to hopelessness. People can be addicted to grief. But one of the things that I should say is that whenever there's an addiction to an affect, to a feeling state, that feeling state becomes more and more assumed rather than authentically experienced and generated. There is a difference between the anger that an anger addict will wear as a normal part of their trappings throughout the day, and what happens if you come up and step on their toe or something like that. And in the latter case, you've perhaps usefully reconnected them with authentic anger, although you probably want to get out of the way.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think anger is probably hands down the most addictive of the feeling states, for the simple reason that it's the only feeling that doesn't involve any degree of vulnerability. And how useful is that?
It leads me to my next question, which is that we're talking about negative feeling states. What about a positive feeling state? Somebody who's always up.
Well,
is there such a thing in
absolutely.
In the world of addiction?
Absolutely. Again, it's interesting. The experience of craving that becomes a part of addiction as it progresses has attributes of feelings that are up, and again, but again, not authentically contributing to our experience of well-being.
Yeah, but that, in the anything but the early stages of addiction, those cravings are very painful.
But they can be very enticing because they are very focusing. They give a sense of purpose. They give a sense of being able to exclude great other areas of the life which in progression are typically deteriorating around us.
Increasingly challenging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to be able to experience and take refuge in the craving can be a real existential payoff.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time? Are we?
Well, we're coming down to the end, but I do want to talk a little bit about the next one, which is cognition, because it does seem to. Can you give us the distinction between this and the ideology? Yes.
Cognition is the exercise of the intellect, and ideology is a particular set of ideas, ostensibly. They may converge for a given person, but they don't need to at all. There are people who are addicted to mathematical games, for example. Now there's nothing ideological about that, but it's a very densely cognitive, I would say.
Yeah.
And it, well, we'll come back to that when we start talking about the three modes of addiction, which probably won't happen until our next meeting. But
well, I know that there is a boost to cognitive technologies. I know my own experience as a person with ADHD as well as the things that we're talking about. I need in the morning. I need a good half hour to 40 minutes of some kind of cognitive exercise in order to get started in the morning. I can't just wake up and get going.
For example.
Well, I watch TED Talks. I read a book that's challenging. You know, not a fluffy book, but a serious book. Anything that will challenge my mind.
But can I ask, does it feel like it feeds you or fixes you?
Oh, it feeds me, I think, because it
doesn't sound addictive.
It's kind of like mental breakfast.
Right. It doesn't sound addictive.
No, it's not.
Right.
No. Although I can see where it could become that way.
Absolutely.
But anyway, we have once again come to the end of our time. Thank you very much, Roget.
My pleasure. Thanks,
We'll pick this
K.C.
up again where we left off. And thank you for joining us on Come to Think of It. I hope you'll be with us next time. Until then, drive cheerfully. I'm K.C. Scott.